I think as a kid, I was brainwashed into believing that if you just wanted something hard enough, your pure, unadulterated willpower was going to magically shove you across the finish line like a rocket-boosted shopping cart. My teachers and parents would always stand at the front of the classroom or the kitchen table going, "Just apply yourself. Just focus. If you set your mind to it, you can achieve anything." And I'm sitting there thinking, wow, okay, cool. So achievement is basically just a software update. You just download the motivation file, click install, and suddenly you're waking up at 5 a.m. wearing a crisp suit, drinking black coffee, and building a multi-million-dollar corporation out of toothpicks and pure discipline. But then you grow up, and you realize that trying to accomplish a major life goal feels a lot more like pushing a rusted minivan up a muddy hill while 3 of your friends sit in the back eating chips and arguing about whether a hot dog is a sandwich. You try to start that new project. You stare at a blank Google Doc for 4 hours blinking like a lonely owl, and then you end up deep diving into a Wikipedia rabbit hole about the history of toaster repair because your brain would rather learn about antique kitchen appliances than face the sheer terror of failure. Do you know why we procrastinate? Because our brains are essentially ancient cave-dwelling survival organs that look at a massive, ambiguous project like writing a book or starting a business and go, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, slow down there, buddy." That requires massive caloric expenditure and exposes us to social judgment. Let's just stay under this warm blanket and scroll through short-form videos until our eyes dry out instead. It is a protective mechanism, but it is also deeply annoying. We stall out, we freeze up, and then we beat ourselves up for being lazy when we are actually just overwhelmed by the sheer psychological weight of our own expectations. We treat our goals like these massive, intimidating monoliths that require total perfection, and then we wonder why we can't take a single step toward them without hyperventilating. But what if the entire framework we use to chase our goals is fundamentally broken? What if trying to force yourself into massive, heroic bursts of productivity is actually the exact reason you keep failing? Today, we are going to look at how to turn those painfully stalled goals into instant psychological wins by tricking your stubborn, anxious brain into moving forward. Because let's be honest, if your strategy for success relies entirely on feeling motivated every single day, you are already screwed. Let's take a quick trip back to a time when my biggest life goal was simply surviving high school algebra without crying on the linoleum floor. Back in grade 10, I had this grand vision of transforming myself into an academic powerhouse. I bought a brand new set of colored gel pens, a pristine, unopened binder with crisp white dividers, and a heavy-duty calculator that looked like it could launch a nuclear submarine. I sat at my desk on a Sunday night, feeling like an absolute titan of industry. I wrote out a color-coded study schedule that looked like a military invasion plan. Monday, algebra mastery. Tuesday, physics dominance. Wednesday, world domination through calculus. I felt unstoppable. I went to school on Monday morning strutting down the hallway like I owned the place, fully convinced that my new stationery had somehow unlocked a secret tier of human intelligence. But then the actual test arrived. I opened the booklet, looked at problem number 1, and my brain instantly flatlined. It was like someone walked into the control room of my mind, pulled the master fire alarm, and ran away laughing. The variable x wasn't just a letter anymore. It was a mocking, sneering symbol of my impending failure. I stared at that single equation for 20 minutes straight, sweating profusely, wondering if I could fake a medical emergency severe enough to get me airlifted out of the classroom. When I got the test back a week later, it had a big, bleeding red grade circled at the top that looked like a crime scene. My grand academic empire had collapsed faster than a house of cards in a wind tunnel, and all I was left with was a bunch of unused pastel highlighters and a deep, crushing sense of inadequacy. Jay, how could you fail algebra after buying such nice pens? Okay, first of all, stationery does not equal mathematical comprehension, and second of all, the guy who sat next to me didn't even study and got an A by pure cosmic accident, so please leave me alone. That massive failure taught me something crucial about how we approach goals. We think we need a complete lifestyle overhaul, a brand new identity, and a monk-like level of discipline to change anything. But when you aim for perfection, any tiny misstep feels like total catastrophe, which makes you want to quit entirely and eat a family-sized bag of chips in the dark. We set the bar so ridiculously high that even clearing it requires a pole vault and a prayer. And that brings us straight into the psychological trap that keeps us stuck, the perfectionism paralysis loop. You've probably experienced this yourself. You want to start a fitness journey, so you tell yourself you're going to hit the gym for 2 hours every single day, completely cut out sugar, and wake up at dawn to drink green sludge that tastes like freshly mown lawn clippings. You maintain this absolute prison camp schedule for roughly 3 days and 12 hours. Then Thursday rolls around. You're tired, it's raining outside, and a friend offers you a slice of pizza. You eat the pizza, and instantly your brain goes, well, the streak is broken. The entire system is ruined. Might as well eat the entire box of pizza, cancel your gym membership, and give up on life. It is all-or-nothing thinking at its absolute finest. We treat our personal growth like a delicate glass sculpture. The moment one tiny chip appears on the surface, we take a sledgehammer to the whole thing because it's no longer flawless. But real psychological progress doesn't work like that. It's messy, it's iterative, and it's built entirely out of tiny, pathetic little steps that look completely insignificant in the moment. When you look at people who actually achieve difficult things, they aren't relying on massive surges of heroic inspiration. They rely on microactions, tiny, ridiculously easy behaviors that bypass the brain's internal panic button. If you want to write a book, don't tell yourself you're going to sit down and grind out 5,000 words a day. Your brain will look at that mountain of text and immediately shut down your computer. Instead, tell yourself you're going to write one single, miserable sentence. Just one. So bad that it hurts to look at. More often than not, once you cross that microscopic threshold, the sheer friction of starting disappears and momentum takes over. But if you don't cross it, you've still written one sentence, which is infinitely better than staring at a blank cursor for 3 hours while your soul slowly leaks out of your ears. Let's look at another classic scenario where we sabotage our own progress. The terrible trap of the accountability partner mismatch. You know how everyone always says, "Oh, you need to tell your friends and family about your goals so they can keep you accountable." That sounds great in theory, right? You proudly announce to your mom that you're starting a new creative project, and you expect her to look at you with tears of profound pride in her eyes, pat you on the back, and say, "Go get him, Tiger, I believe in you." But what actually happens? You tell your family your big plans, and they look at you like you've just grown a second head. You're doing what? Why don't you just study for a stable corporate job with a pension and health insurance like your cousin Kevin? Kevin just bought a house with a 2-car garage and a pristine lawn, and you're sitting in your room drawing funny little characters on a glowing tablet. Suddenly, instead of feeling motivated, you feel like an absolute fraud. Your well-meaning relatives accidentally trigger every single ounce of your deep-seated imposter syndrome, and you crawl back into your shell feeling twice as stuck as you were before. It's like trying to buy a used PlayStation 3 off an online classifieds ad and ending up in a bizarre, high-stakes psychological thriller where you're not even sure if you're at the right apartment building. Remember that time I tried to buy a used PS3 from a guy on Kijiji? The listing said 2048 Shimmer Street, but when I got there were 2 separate buildings labeled A and B, and neither address seemed to correspond to reality. I'm standing in the lobby in the dark, texting this anonymous stranger while my brain races through every true crime documentary I've ever watched, absolutely convinced that my kidneys are about to be harvested and sold on the black market to pay for someone's grocery bill. The seller turns out to be a middle-aged dad whose kid tried to haggle the price down, back up, and then down again in a pricing strategy that defied all known laws of economics. When we share our half-baked goals with people who aren't equipped to support them, we are walking right into that exact kind of confusing, high-anxiety lobby without a map. You're handing your fragile new ambitions over to people who might accidentally drop them on the tile floor because they don't understand what you're trying to build. That's why true goal acceleration often requires a bit of stealth isolation. You don't need to broadcast every single thought, draft, and half-formed idea to the entire world before it even has a chance to breathe. Protect your early-stage projects the same way you protect your personal space. Keep the circle small, keep the noise down, and test your equipment in a safe room before you try to boot it up in front of an audience that might accidentally pull the plug out of the wall. So how do we break out of this cycle of stalling, overthinking, and accidental self-sabotage? How do we actually turn a stalled goal into an instant win without losing our minds in the process? This brings us straight to the core psychological framework of the Microwin Loop. When your brain is stuck in a state of paralysis, it is usually because the dopamine reward pathway has dried up. You've been working toward a massive, distant horizon, like getting a degree, launching a channel, or saving up for a major life change. And your brain literally cannot process a reward that is 6 months or 2 years away. Evolutionarily speaking, our ancestors didn't care about long-term retirement plans. They cared about whether there was a saber-toothed cat hiding behind the nearest berry bush. If a reward is too far in the future, your neurochemistry treats it as a non-existent fairy tale. To trick your brain into staying engaged, you have to manufacture immediate, artificial closure and rewards for tiny behaviors. This is why checking items off a physical to-do list feels so deeply satisfying, even if the item you just checked off was literally wake up or breathe oxygen. Your brain sees the check mark, registers a tiny hit of dopamine, and goes, "Hey, look at us, we're productive geniuses, let's do it again." We can weaponize this exact neurological quirk against our own procrastination. If you have a massive project hanging over your head like a looming dark cloud, chop it down into pieces so absurdly small that it feels embarrassing not to do them. Don't write "work on project." Write "open the folder." Once the folder is open, write "rename document." Once the document is renamed, write "type 1 subheading." By breaking the friction barrier into microscopic increments, you bypass the amygdala's panic response and trick your system into generating its own momentum. It's like eating a giant meal one single grain of rice at a time. It sounds ridiculous, but eventually, the plate is empty and you didn't even have to choke on a massive mouthful. Let's address the elephant in the room. What happens when you actually take action, put yourself out there, and still get completely shut down? Rejection is usually the silent killer of goals. You finally build up the courage to share your art, pitch an idea, or ask someone out, and you get hit with a cold, flat refusal. It feels terrible. It feels like someone walked up to you in front of a crowd of your peers and poured a bucket of ice-cold reality down your shirt. I remember back in high school when I finally confessed my feelings to my best friend Joyce, fully expecting some kind of cinematic romantic comedy breakthrough where background music swells and we embrace in slow motion. Instead, I got the polite, gentle equivalent of a software error message. "You're a great friend, but I just don't see you that way." Ouch. My internal ego deflated faster than a punctured pool float in the middle of winter. I sat there wondering what was fundamentally wrong with my character design, questioning every single interaction we had ever shared, and feeling like my entire romantic roadmap was filled with dead ends. But looking back on it with some actual adult perspective, that rejection wasn't a reflection of my worth as a human being. It was simply two people occupying different frequencies at the same time. Most people make the massive mistake of taking rejection as an indictment of their entire existence, leading straight into the pity zone where you feel like the universe owes you compensation for your bruised feelings. But if you can separate your personal identity from the specific outcome of an interaction, rejection stops being a terrifying monster and starts being just another data point. It's like trying out a new recipe and realizing you accidentally added 3 tablespoons of salt instead of 3 pinches. It tastes awful, you can't eat it, but it doesn't mean you're a terrible person who should never be allowed near a kitchen again. It just means you adjust the measurements for the next attempt. When your goals stall out because a specific plan didn't work, don't throw away the entire kitchen. Look at the data, adjust the seasoning, and try again tomorrow. And that brings us to another hilarious trap we fall into when trying to fix our stalled goals, the productivity tool addiction. Have you ever noticed how when you're avoiding doing actual work, you will engage in the most elaborate, sophisticated forms of productive procrastination imaginable? You'll spend 4 entire hours organizing your digital folder hierarchy, color-coding your tags in Obsidian, setting up custom keyboard shortcuts, and downloading 3 different minimalist productivity apps that promise to align your chakras and double your output by sunset. You feel like an absolute genius because you're surrounded by glowing screens of pure, unadulterated organization. But then you look at the actual output counter at the end of the day, and you haven't written a single sentence or moved a single real project forward. You just built a gorgeous, high-tech garage for a car that doesn't have an engine. We use complex organization systems as a psychological shield to protect ourselves from the discomfort of actual creation. It feels safe to tinker with the tools because tinkering doesn't expose you to failure. If your note-taking app looks like a NASA control center, but you haven't published anything, created anything, or finished anything meaningful, you're just hiding behind a very expensive digital smokescreen. True productivity is messy, chaotic, and often involves staring at an ugly draft while your brain screams in agony. You don't need a more sophisticated system. You just need a lower threshold for starting the messy work. Stop spending 3 days designing the perfect logo for a project that doesn't exist yet, and just open a plain text editor and start typing the ugly, broken sentences that will eventually become something real. Let's talk about the sneaky power of the inner monologue when things actually start going right. You know that voice in your head, the one that narrates every single minor awkwardness and blows it completely out of proportion? That voice is a master storyteller, but it's usually working for the wrong team. When you're trying to push through a stalled goal, your inner monologue loves to whisper things like, "Remember that time 3 years ago when you messed up that presentation? Everyone is still thinking about it, and they're definitely going to judge you if you try this again." It uses your own past embarrassing memories as tactical weapons against your present ambition. But here is the secret about human psychology. Nobody is thinking about you nearly as much as you are thinking about yourself. This is known as the spotlight effect, the delightful psychological quirk where we walk around assuming that a massive, invisible stadium spotlight is permanently fixed on our forehead, illuminating every single mistake, awkward pause, and mismatched sock for the entire world to critique. In reality, everyone else in the stadium is sitting in the dark, shining their own little pocket flashlights at their own foreheads, completely panicked that someone might notice their own flaws. When you realize that the audience is too busy worrying about their own performance to care about your clumsy dance moves, a massive weight lifts off your shoulders. You are free to be mediocre, free to make mistakes, and free to look ridiculous while you figure things out. That freedom is the exact fuel you need to get your stalled goals moving again. So how do we tie all of this together into a practical, actionable blueprint that you can use right now, today, without needing to buy a new planner or reorganize your entire digital life? Let's break it down into a simple, 3-step framework designed to bypass your brain's defense mechanisms and generate instant momentum. Step 1. Identify the wall. Stop pretending you're just lazy. Look at the specific goal that has been stalling out in your life and pinpoint the exact friction point. Is the task too big? Are you afraid of looking stupid? Do you not know what the very next physical action is? Name the obstacle clearly, because you cannot fight an enemy you refuse to look in the eye. Step 2. Shrink the target until it's laughable. If the task feels heavy, reduce its scope until your brain looks at it and goes, "Well, I can't possibly fail at something that's stupidly easy." Commit to writing 1 sentence, opening 1 file, or doing 1 push-up. Remove all expectations of quality and replace them entirely with the sheer act of completion. Step 3. Protect the momentum bubble. Once you take that tiny step, don't immediately broadcast it to the world or invite outside criticism into your workspace. Keep your head down, enjoy the microscopic hit of dopamine from that tiny win, and let it propel you into the next small action. Before you know it, that massive, terrifying monolith of a goal that was haunting your dreams will start moving forward, not because you forced yourself through sheer brute force agony, but because you outsmarted your own resistance one tiny, absurdly simple step at a time. And if you mess up, if you fall off the wagon, or if you spend 3 days staring at a blank wall wondering what you're doing with your life, congratulations, you're human. Shake it off, laugh at the absurdity of your own overthinking brain, and drop the bar right back down to the floor where you can easily step over it. Now go get your ass over here and start working on that goal, because nobody else is going to do it for you.